starting.
Hello, my name is Gary Scudder, a professor here in the core division at Champlain, ably assisted by the excellent Sarah Christensen, who's trying to earn, well, she's trying to essentially pay me off for having to read so many of her rough drafts. So she's helping me on camera today. Thank you, Sarah. Today I want to talk about, I guess this is one of those more universal discussions. Often I will just do core talks about 110 or 220 or 330, but I guess this is a more universal pedagogy issue, and that is this, and I will get certainly mocked from my colleagues for this, let alone my students, and that is this. I'm a big proponent of bringing in weightier material into all of my classes, whether it's freshman or sophomore or junior, or for that matter senior when they let me tackle the seniors occasionally. For instance, I guess we could say the classics, though that has a sort of negative connotation. For instance, in 110, I very frequently I used to make use of Winesburg, Ohio. In there, we used to read like 4 or 5 different, sometimes 7 or 8 different chapters from Winesburg, Ohio, or we would read the poetry of Sappho. Or this year in 110, I had the students, I'd taken Othello and made it the core text, as I think I talked about in another core talk, where we do 4 different 5-page papers on Othello. In core 120, concepts of community, I will quite commonly bring in Marcus Aurelius, which also makes my friends groan, since I'm a huge Marcus Aurelius fan. I'll bring in Confucius. In core 220, I had the students read The Moon and Sixpence. I also tend to go pretty complicated on the art. I know a lot of my colleagues, obviously much more brilliant and with it than me, tend to do a lot of graffiti art or things like that, where I tend to do sort of much more traditional, even though I guess, I did expand it by going much more into Indian art or Navajo art. In core 270, I've had the students read short retellings of the Ramayana. I've had them read short retellings of Shahnameh. There's to write an entire paper on the ballet. And gosh, in 330, I've had the students read the entire Quran. I've had them read Journey to the West. So, I'm pretty brutal with them. I've had them read Hafez in 330s. I've had them read Rumi in 330s. So I'm sort of that guy. And part of it could just be I'm sort of old school, or if not just old. But I tend to take the opportunity. Now, why? Why am I such a stickler for taking this opportunity? Well, for any number of reasons. I could probably think of 5 or 6 on the top of my head why I would encourage my colleagues, and I'm not scolding you because everyone has a different approach, but I think we have this opportunity to actually bring the classics to an audience in a meaningful way. Part of it is, think about it, for a lot of the students, this is going to be their only experience to read the Ramayana or to read the poetry of Rumi or to read Winesburg, Ohio. And even if they've read it before, they probably read it in high school with a remarkably bad teacher who was also the assistant football coach or something, so they didn't really get the beauty of it. So I think this is our opportunity. I know the students don't want us to do this, but with me, what the students want is the last thing I'm ever concerned with. I think that you don't negotiate with terrorists. I remember having a student one time tell me that I should really have the students read more graphic novels because they're quicker than regular novels, which is exactly why I don't want to give in to the terrorists on this. I think, and I'm a sincere believer in this, that there is sort of a cultural lexicon that educated, intellectual, sophisticated people have. I remember a strange example of this. I remember a good friend of mine, this is a very good friend of mine back in college, and he was a wrestler and was a very good athlete and was a football player. And I remember talking about, I said, well, you should really consider, because he wanted to be an attorney. I said, well, so you're going to start playing golf? And he said, why? I said, well, because it is sort of the stupid country club thing to do in your sort of bourgeois attorney world. Because I said, it's very seldom, very infrequent that actually one of the other attorneys is going to ask you if you want to wrestle on the weekend, but they'll probably want to play golf with you. And the same thing here. I think there is sort of a cultural currency that their bosses will have someday. They'll expect the students who actually have read the classics and be conversant with them. So I do think it actually benefits them. Also, I think there is a complexity to the classics. There is a depth. I think when we fall in the trap of trying to make the students happy by having them read a bunch of graphic novels or really popular novels, I mean, I'm not saying they're bad, but they're not as deep as having the students, grind their way through Bleak House or get at the more subtle meanings of the Iliad, or for that matter, tackle Navajo art. I think that one of the things we always talk about is creating a sense of analysis and intellectual depth. And I do think the classics bring that. And I think that we are doing the students a disservice when we give them readings that are essentially too popular, too light. I also think that there's something to be said, especially if you're dealing with other cultures, in getting into the classics. Because, I agree with Dewey from the Freeland book, What is Art, when he talks about, when John Dewey says that art is a universal language. And Freeland says he thought this required an immediate encounter. And I think that if you're going to understand the Persians, or you're going to understand India, or you're going to understand China, the closer you come to the classics. I mean, Freeland herself says there's no such thing as a work which is completely non-touched by the rest of the world. But I think when you look at works like that, you're going to get closer to fine, to quote the REM song. So I think it also has a brilliant sort of cultural touchstone approach. Also, there is just something, I'm a big believer in that human beings at their best are when they are writing and creating. And the Persian poet Rumi said that you should judge a moth by the beauty of its candle. And I do think, and this is such an old school view, that these works are human beings at their absolute best. And I think that it's something that's well worth studying. Does this mean I want my students to be complete nerds? No, not entirely. I know there was a book several years ago called The Twilight of American Culture by Morris Berman, and he coined the phrase of new monastic individuals, that we're all in the face of idiocy going to, the truly intellectual folks are going to carve off little identities themselves, almost like new monks. And I'm not really calling for that, but I do think that we as professors have the responsibility of finding ways to keep these works alive. I mean, we fell in love with them for a reason. And these are great works which are both beautiful and profound. And I think we do owe it to our students to keep this alive. So, I want to thank you as always. I want to thank Sarah. And as always, if anyone has any questions, please let me know. If not, thank you very much.